Volkswagen targets layoffs and 10% pay cuts amid plans for German plant closures, union says. So Volkswagen is struggling, but I feel like just how much they're struggling is not talked about enough. If we look at their stock price here, currently it sits at about $9.16, which is plus 130% over all of time. But if we look at the specifics here, we can go back to around 2009, 2010, and we can see that basically in this last 15 years, their stock has essentially not changed at all. And compare that to something like an index like the S&P 500. If we go max and then go back to where we were in that 2009 area, from 2009 to today, you would have made 6.24 times your money back. You're up over 600% in that same time period. So Volkswagen is doing really poorly. And not only are they doing poorly recently, as you can see here in the past 3 years, they have never gotten back to the heights that they were pre-financial crisis and housing crash of the 2008. And for details and specifics of what's going on with Volkswagen, we get some answers here. Volkswagen asked its workers to take a 10% pay cut on Wednesday, arguing it was the only way that Europe's biggest car maker could save jobs and remain competitive as profits plunged to a 3-year low and union bosses threatened strikes. It was the first official confirmation of cost-cutting measures VW wants to implement to turn around its fortunes as high costs and weak demand in China dragged down sales and left its factories bloated from overcapacity. The company did not directly address the issue of whether it planned to close factories in Germany for the first time in Volkswagen's 87-year history, though Labour Party representatives said that option remains on the table. Volkswagen's problems have fed wider anxieties about Germany's status as an industrial powerhouse and the competitiveness of European car makers against encroaching global rivals. German automakers also fear the impact of a standoff between the European Union and Beijing, which is China, with EU tariffs of up to 45.3% on Chinese electronic vehicles coming into force this week. We urgently need a reduction in labor costs in order to maintain our competitiveness. This requires a contribution from the workforce. Arnie somebody, the Volkswagen brand's personnel chief who leads negotiations for the car maker, said. So this spokesperson for Volkswagen is giving out their justifications for the layoffs. They are twofold. Firstly, costs are up and demand is going down, and China's manufacturing competitiveness is becoming a huge issue, not just for Volkswagen, but also the entirety of the European Union's economy. The second thing is, as a result of that, pay cuts and layoffs are necessary. I want to address each of these things individually. First, for costs going up, I mean, yeah, you're probably not surprised to hear that. The entire world has experienced a huge amount of inflation in the past couple of years, and Germany is no exception. I have no trouble believing that their costs are far higher than they were probably 1 up to 3 years ago. And as for demand going down, I think that's probably also true, and that's linked to China's competitiveness as they're able to turn out really cheap cars that they are sending all over the world. And the EU actually knew this was going to be an issue a few years ago, and as such conducted an investigation about this very potential situation, and they have their results here. EU policymakers warned a few months ago that Europe was being flooded with cheap Chinese electronic vehicles. They accused Beijing of backing up major production overcapacity to allow China's automakers to grow their share of the global EV market. The European Commission, the EU's executive arm, launched an anti-subsidy probe into the oversupply issue in late 2023 and warned China's EV makers that they could face new import tariffs to offset what Brussels said was unfair competition for European car makers. On Wednesday, the Commission said that it planned to impose tariffs of up to 38% on Chinese electronic vehicles from July 4th, and those tariffs would vary by automaker. The EU currently levies a 10% tariff. The announcement prompted a warning of retaliation by Beijing. So the EU saw this coming, and they had their European Commission look into it, see the problems, look at what solutions could be done, and then threaten those solutions in the form of tariffs against Beijing, hoping that this would not become the issue that it's currently causing. They're just trying their best to preserve the European Union economy from the Chinese industrial complex. So, did it work? Well, not really. Volkswagen said significant cost cuts are urgently needed as it reported a steep decline in third quarter earnings on Wednesdays and faced employee representatives angry at the possibility of the automaker's first plant closures in Germany. The company reported net profit of 1.58 billion euros for the July through September period, a 64% decline from the 4.35 billion euros it had earned a year earlier. Revenue was marginally lower, slipping 0.5% to 78.9 billion euros. The figure figures came 2 days after the head of Volkswagen's work council said management had informed employee representatives that it wants to close at least 3 German plants. The company hasn't publicly detailed its plans. So in short, no, the solutions offered by the European Commission have not done nearly enough to try and preserve the EU's car market, as is shown here by EU's largest car maker Volkswagen doing continuously more and more poorly as time goes on, despite the fact that these tariffs are ramping up. Now, whether or not China is artificially propping up local manufacturing to try and push the rest of the world out of competition is a complicated issue. But the results of the manufacturing coming out of China is not a complicated issue. Straight up, it is hurting companies in the European Union and in the United States. And as a result of that pain being felt from overseas competition, both countries levy tariffs. But it's not just as simple as if you levy a tariff, then people will switch away from the now expensive Chinese cars and start buying the cheaper local ones. If the EU levies a tariff, then China does the same thing, and Volkswagen becomes uncompetitive in China, which is a huge market, not only for Volkswagen, but also for any Western company. It's called a trade war. If you're an American, you might be familiar with Trump's trade war with China. Basically, you say that if you levy tariffs on me, I'm going to levy tariffs back on you. So if the United States and the European Union levy heavy tariffs on China's cars, then China's going to do the same thing. And then companies that depend on Chinese markets for their sales, like Tesla and Volkswagen, will see tariffs go up and their demand go down. And as such, their profits will continue to decline. And it's not just car makers. Apple is feeling the pain of iPhone sales dropping in China due to this exact situation. It's a very complex issue. And honestly, I don't really have a good solution for how to solve it. But I do know one very important thing, that after these pay cuts and these layoffs, Volkswagen will next year have higher revenues than they had this year. And that will result in their CEO getting a huge pay raise because he fired people and closed plants. Thanks for watching.